Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's FP Virtual Dialogue, a very informative conversation about the cutting edge of space technology and Earth observation, and the increasing role it plays in the context of humanitarian relief and crisis mitigation efforts. My name is Andrew Solinger. I'm the publisher of Foreign Policy, and it's my pleasure to be your host this morning. In the face of natural disasters, satellite-derived topographic and population data can provide tactical insights to mitigate risk to human life and the overall cost of emergency responses. Especially in fragile environments with limited access to on-the-ground intelligence, eyes in the sky can enable decision makers across defense, security, and humanitarian sectors to detect potential threats or hazards. Satellite data can help security forces and aid workers navigate remote locations with poor infrastructure and deliver assistance to populations in need. These are just some of the areas where increasingly governments and organizations are able to utilize the images and data from Earth observation to better anticipate and prevent or manage crises. Today's excellent lineup of speakers will help us explore these innovative use cases in more detail and take a look at the future of space-based technology, a rapidly evolving frontier. So thank you for tuning in, and a very big thanks to Maxar for helping make this event possible. We couldn't do it without their partnership. Before we get started, we want to be sure we can hear from you, our audience. We have many hundreds of people tuned in here on Zoom, as well as watching our live streams on social media. So we've reserved a portion of this event for questions from our global audience, and here's how you can participate. If you're on Zoom, click on the Q&A button below at the bottom of your screen and submit your questions. Please be sure to tell us your name, your organization, and the location you're watching from. And please remember to tell us your organization. It really helps to add vital context to your questions. And if you're joining us on the phone or watching the live stream, you can email us your questions. The address to email is events@foreignpolicy.com. And as always, we encourage you to chime in on social media. Be sure to use the hashtag #EarthIntel. All right, so let's get started. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Tony Frazier, Executive Vice President of Global Field Operations at Maxar. Tony joined Maxar in 2017 after its acquisition of Digital Globe and serves as EVP of Global Field Ops. In this role, he leads all sales, business development, and services delivery activities for the company outside of the Canadian market. Welcome to the program, Tony.
Hey, Andrew, good morning. How are you?
I'm really well. Thanks for joining us. Really appreciate it. Now, Maxar, a very well-known player in the high-resolution satellite imagery space, but and many of our audience, I'm sure, are familiar with it. But there's probably a lot on our audience that aren't as familiar with Maxar. Maybe you could just those very few. Maybe you could help bring them up a curve and give them a quick summary of your mission and focus overall, very quickly, if you would.
Sure. So Maxar is a U.S.-based company that is a provider of Earth intelligence and space infrastructure to organizations across the public and private sector. We work with the U.S. government, international governments, non-government organizations, as well as commercial companies to help our customers understand and navigate our changing planet through our Earth intelligence business. But we also build space infrastructure for mission partners like communications companies like SiriusXM, Intelsat, as well as work with civil governments, organizations like NASA.
Excellent, thank you. And Tony knows I like to do this when we speak. We eat the Maxar cooking at Foreign Policy. Maxar is very generous to make available to us their imagery for use in our reporting. And I'd like to share a really quick screenshot of how FP deploys this. This is not on the topic, a focus that we're talking about today, but this is a story that we broke a couple of weeks ago about China building villages and installations over the border in Bhutanese territory without their permission. And we use Maxar imagery before on the left and after on the right to support this type of reporting. And we do that regularly. So we know this is really valuable intel, and Maxar has got great eyes in the sky that we find really valuable for our work. So thank you very much for that, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, but that's not what we're here to talk about today. We want to focus more on humanitarian and disaster recovery initiatives. And I know Maxar's got a lot going on in that space as well. I'd love to hear if you could share a little bit about Maxar's work in that humanitarian and disaster recovery space, if you would.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what's interesting, and this was well summarized in the impact brief that you published, there's a really interesting intersection between the types of data sets and analytic techniques that we use to predict uh, events like extreme weather events that we see with hurricanes and flooding and wildfires and the like. Um, using sources that are generally made available to the public, like assets from NOAA, European Space Agency, et cetera. But then also applying that insight to understand where there's high risk for a trending event, and then when an event happens, how you would quickly be able to detect change and equip decision makers with the information they need to focus their response efforts. So a lot of things we do at Maxar related to disaster response, we do in partnership with our customers, as well as through our philanthropic efforts, where we collect massive amounts of imagery over areas of the world that establish a baseline of what normal is. And then when change happens, we collect that data as well, and then make it available in an analytic ready form, so that the community can exploit it, whether it's through manual means, through crowdsourcing, as well as through automated means, through applying algorithms against that data. And so probably the best specific example to put into context is what we've seen around wildfire activity around the world. And so we saw this last year in Australia. They were dealing with broad wildfires across the country. We followed up with wildfires that were ravaging California, Colorado, and Oregon, that impacted over 6 million acres of land mass, and in equipping the both kind of frontline first responders with the information they needed about where the fire lines were, was something we did in partnership with our customer, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. We were able to make millions of square kilometers of imagery available, to the public, and then apply spectral analysis using our shortwave infrared to be able to see through smoke to identify where the specific fire line was. And so equipping mission partners like FEMA, the National Guard, et cetera, with that information is something that we do on a routine basis. We do that with the US government. We do it with international government customers. We also do it through our philanthropic efforts. So we have an open data program where over the course of this program, we've activated this program around over 200 events, where when there's some major event that impacts an area, we will make our imagery available to the public via a Creative Commons non-commercial license, which then allows the community, organizations like Team Rubicon or the OpenStreetMap community, to be able to rapidly analyze that data and push information that is needed, to people in need. So those are some areas that we're really, really proud of.
That's great. And I'd love to come back to that open mapping and shared data resource point in 1 second. But I just want to reference what Tony brought up. And this is an issue brief that our excellent research team at FP, called FP Analytics, created on this issue, on geospatial data use responding to crises. And there's some very cool imagery in there, specifically slider imagery from both the California River fire last year, before and after, with sliders, as well as imagery from the Bahamas, pre and post Hurricane Dorian. And if you signed up for this event, you would have received an email with a link to that brief. And you're also going to get a follow-up from me with a link to that brief. But in the meantime, if you want to check it out, you can have a look on the event website. It's posted there right now, and you can have a look at it. And it's very interesting, actually, to go through. Excellent content as well as imagery. So thank you for reminding us on that. And by the way, you could also look at it at our website, fpanalytics.foreignpolicy.com. You can't miss it if you go there. So yeah, you brought up an interesting point about making this data available in an open format, non-classified data. There is so much image data out there now that government can't possibly effectively process all of it. And you brought up this point, this effort that you're undertaking. How else is Maxar addressing this? I mean, there's got to be ways that you can mechanize the broader world of analysis, beyond your client base if possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I think what we're seeing is a pattern, and I'll be brief because I know we have other great content in this event. Is we see a lot of power in bringing together a convergence of automation with crowdsourcing. We're all familiar with the revolution that's occurring in artificial intelligence, machine learning. We've been cultivating innovation in that field through an effort called SpaceNet, where we've hosted 7 competitions where we do cash prizes for coming up with algorithms to automate certain tasks like extracting roads and buildings from satellite imagery. Combining that type of automation, with what you can do through crowdsourcing, communities like the OpenStreetMap community, is really powerful. And so we've seen cases where cities or countries were mapped in days that would normally take months or even years, because you're able to really quickly assemble a broad ecosystem of users that converge around a use case. And I think a lot of what you're going to hear about today from the other speakers are how they've been applying that to their missions.
That's quite right. Okay, so we do have one question before you go. If you'll take one question, do you have?
Absolutely.
And you could take that. Let's not focus on the military intelligence aspects of this, but this is from Andrew Mulchan. He's a U.S. Army Space Missile Defense Command, and he would just like to know about where do you see Maxar's involvement in the polar regions as this area grows in strategic importance. There's been a lot of coverage of this of late, both in the pages of FP ourselves and the general press. What's your view on Maxar's involvement in the polar developments?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we see a massive opportunity, there, particularly in understanding change over time. So one of the assets we have is we have a kind of a living library of change across our planet. We've been collecting data over the last 20 years, and obviously with the impact of climate change, there's been a big change in the terrain, there. And so that certainly is a heavy area of focus. Would love to have more conversation on it. But in terms of building not just 2D maps, but also 3D models that would leverage the temporal depth of and the high revisit capabilities of our constellation to characterize the environment is definitely something that we're highly focused on.
That's great. That's a really important region and area that everyone's focused on. So great to hear that you're on it too. Tony, thank you so much. I think this is a great way to set the stage for our next speakers, and we appreciate your time and your insights. And thank you again for supporting this very, very important conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you, Andrew.
So that was Tony Frazier, the Executive Vice President of Maxar. Really interesting conversation, but let's have more interesting conversations. And I've got a really interesting speaker that we want to have on the program next, Major General Charles Cleveland. General Cleveland is Associate Director for Operations at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, better known as NGA, and assumed his duties there in January of 2019. As the Director of Operations, General Cleveland oversees the execution of NGA's mission across the intelligence community and the DoD. He coordinates daily GeoInt operations within NGA, prioritizing assets to oversee crisis management, deployment of personnel, and capabilities. And he knows what he's doing. He was previously Vice Director of Intel for the Joint Chiefs, following a distinguished military career. We're very happy to have him here. General Cleveland, thank you for joining us.
Andrew, thanks a lot. I really appreciate the opportunity to be a part of today's forum, and I'm really looking forward to telling a little bit about our agency and kind of the direction we're going. So thanks for including us.
My pleasure. And let's start there. Actually, we have several hundred people on this call, very popular call right now, interested in the topic, and many of them know about the NGA or heard of the NGA. But maybe you could just give us a quick summary of NGA's mission and structure for the uninitiated.
Yeah, absolutely, Andrew. So NGA, again, as you noted, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, we are a combat support agency. So we're part of the Department of Defense, but we're also a member of the intelligence community. And so we also report not only to the Secretary of Defense, but to the Director of National Intelligence. We've got about 15,000 people in the agency. About 50% of them are here at the location I'm at in Springfield, Virginia. About 25% are in St. Louis, where we've been based for many, many years. And we're in the process of building, in fact, a new campus and a new facility, and very excited about the potential that holds. And then we've got about 25% of our workforce that's really spread around the world, and they're embedded with our partners, be it combatant commands, be it U.S. embassies, be it other agencies and organizations. The agency is really about 20 years old, but the functions that we do are really the product of a merger between everything the U.S. government was doing from a cartography standpoint, building maps and charts, to an imagery analysis standpoint. And so the agency really is a product of merging those two capabilities together into one agency. And specifically our mission, we provide geospatial intelligence to the U.S. government. And sometimes, when you throw the term intelligence on, that can have connotations to different folks in different places. But, the GEOIN is really defined as imagery analysis, and then geospatial information. So again, that is really the geodetic sciences. It's building maps, it's building charts, et cetera. The way that we conduct our mission, though, there's really three kind of core components to it. The first we refer to as foundation. And again, that is building those maps, building those charts, and disseminating to the right partners. The second aspect is collection orchestration. And so we really take in all the requirements from the U.S. government for GEOIN, and we work with our partners, the NRO, and with a number of other partners to satisfy those requirements. And then, of course, we do analysis, and we provide that analysis really to national security policymakers. We provide it to war fighters, but also, and this is a little bit less known, we do have a real mission as it comes to humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery. And so we're quite proud of that effort, and we do put a lot of work into that.
Great. So let's dig into that part of your work, and thank you very much for that background. And before we dig into that part of your work, I want to remind the audience that they're welcome to ask questions. This is your opportunity to ask questions of the Associate Director of the NGA. So don't be shy, and we'll bring a couple of those. They're coming in right now. We'll bring a couple of those questions in. So FP, looking through our archives, not that far back in 2018. Reported on the NGA making high-resolution satellite imagery, non-classified, available to rights organizations. And initially, this focused on North Korea. And a little later, we'll be talking with one of the leaders in geospatial mapping at USAID about how they use your data and imagery. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the organizations that NGA works with in this space of humanitarian aid, disaster recovery, and the like?
Sure, absolutely. First off, and even broader than just the humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery, when we even look at national security efforts, we do subscribe and agree that we as a nation are absolutely in the information competition business right now. And so we really do think that one of the things that we as an agency have to be able to do is we have to take a lot of our information and a lot of our data and get it into the hands of not only policymakers, but allow them or get it into their hands in the format that allows them to engage, frankly, in the information competition. As it pertains to humanitarian assistance and disaster recovery, we actually have great relationships with a number of federal agencies as well as a number of partners. The way it works for us is typically when some type of disaster is declared, a lead federal agency will be declared. And in some instances, it'll be State Department, USAID when it comes to something overseas, be it a typhoon in Mozambique or a hurricane in the Bahamas. And in some instances, it is FEMA when it's a hurricane hitting the United States or fires. And so once that declaration is made, we do provide direct support into that lead federal agency. And oftentimes we'll provide it directly to them. But then we also work a number of partnerships with others who are involved. Those partnerships include with academia, with think tanks, and then with a number of commercial partners. And we try and really work a broader enterprise enterprise so that we can create this broader tapestry of GeoInt support. And, fundamentally, Andrew, we believe that partnerships are the key for the success to our organization. And again, those partnerships are with a number of government activities and agencies. There are a number of allies and partners. And then, as I mentioned, academia, think tanks, and then, of course, our commercial partners and friends that we work with very closely.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that, General Cleveland. And the questions are coming in right now, and I'd like to give you one relevant to some of the organizations we were just talking about. So this is from Dr. Darren Smith of the State Department in DC. Dr. Smith tells us that he just returned from 5.5 years of adventures in Africa and wants to know what is being done to improve capacity in more impoverished countries, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Cameroon, among others, to acquire and analyze imagery for environmental and border security analysis, so agricultural development, climate change. Are there organized programs that U.S. Embassy commercial and economic sections can help advocate that you know of?
Sure. We again, we do believe geospatial information is actually something that those who are posted overseas, be it at U.S. AFRICOM headquarters in Stuttgart, or be it in the embassies and the posts and the consulates around the continent, should and can be able to use. We're pretty proud of a lot of our partnerships. And of course, our information exchange policies really kind of span the spectrum. In some instances, we are just sharing just basic terrain data or basic navigation data. And then at times it will go all the way up to the exchange of intelligence. What typically will start the process for us is some type of announcement of a requirement. So from a particular embassy saying, hey, we would like to work the following efforts, and we would like to work with our partners and exchange this. I'll give you an example recently, and this was in the press in the fall of 2020, but we as a government recently signed a basic exchange of information with the government of India on terrain data. And that was something that SecState and SecDef were able to deliver during a trip there last fall. And so for us, typically it will begin with a requirement that comes from post. That requirement, we do have an NGA element. We refer to them as NGA support teams based at State Department headquarters, and that becomes the entry point into our broader system. I hope that helps.
Great, that is very helpful. Thank you so much. And we're getting a lot of questions, but people are very interested in accessing this imagery. We're getting lots of questions around that. So asking for it sounds like what you're advocating and making that case up through your organization is the right approach, if I'm hearing you correctly. With Tony Frazier of Maxar, we spoke about the immensity of the data that you're collecting. And I'd like to talk to you about that from two different perspectives. One is it just too much data for the government to effectively process? And I'm not at all indicating any lack of capability of processing it. It's just an immense amount. And so how do you, one of the things that Maxar is doing is making some of that data available in an open source way. And I'm wondering if that's an element of the approach. And then the second I'd like to ask related to that is how you are working through AI and trying to standardize data sets to make that a little bit more relatable, perhaps, to data sets that NASA, for example, is compiling around hurricane response, et cetera. So two kinds of questions around the volume and the way that you're managing that data.
Angie, thanks. You just hit on the $1 million question for the future of our organization and the things that we have to tackle. We really do believe, and Tony referenced it as well earlier, we really do believe we're in the midst of a revolution in GeoInt. And I know the term revolution is overused, and it's used so frequently that it almost kind of loses its meaning. But when you look at the advancements in the GeoInt and the remote sensing community over the last 10 years and where the community is going over the next 10 years, and you contrast that to the preceding 50, 75 years, it really is a revolution. It's a revolution in collection where we are going from what was just a few national systems that could have a couple of passes a day over a certain piece of terrain to we'll soon hit the point where every foot on Earth will be imaged every 24 hours. We're hitting a revolution in analytic capabilities. Again, historically, you've had, it's been a very manpower, human intensive effort to look at these images and determine, is there a change? Is there something new, et cetera? And now we're getting to the point where machines can do in a matter of minutes what humans were taking days to do. And that really allows us to free our humans up to do more thoughtful work and really be able to apply a lot more of their analytic capability. And then the final aspect of the revolution is really in the dissemination capabilities. Again, for many years, imagery and overhead remote sensing was only available to a few in the US government. And now, of course, we'll walk out of this session today and turn on our cell phones, and we're able to use all the mapping, all the traffic avoidance. We're able to look at real estate from Google imagery and everything else out there. And so we're really in the midst of this revolution. And the way that we view it right now is we can't just add a few more analysts, or we can't just take a little bit of slack out of this system or that system. In many ways, we have to flip on its head the way that we are conducting business. And the way that we think that we are going to do that is, again, through the automation of all of our efforts, our collection capabilities to be able to take in this tremendous number of requirements that we get from the US government and marry those requirements up with the appropriate collection capability or the appropriate service out there. And we think that we're absolutely going to have to automate the way that we are doing analysis. For us, it really kind of comes together, in what we would refer to as automated target recognition, so that these sensing capabilities can immediately recognize what it is we're searching for. But to do that, there is a lot of manpower that's required. And so you have to be able to not only develop an algorithm, but to train those algorithms, and to train those algorithms, that does take an awful lot of time. And as we are seeing, oftentimes we can be lulled into a sense, again, with your iPhone or your pocket camera, that you flip through and your artificial intelligence picks out all the pictures of a cat or whatever the case may be. And of course, now we're looking at doing this at, hundreds of miles up in the atmosphere, very, very small things that we're looking at. And so we think that we have a long way to go. To your point about crowdsourcing, though, again, we do participate in that. In some instances, it's kind of US government version of crowdsourcing. And then in other instances, we are able to leverage and harness some of the other crowdsourcing capabilities that are out there.
That's great. But and you're quite right that we all are using GeoInt every day, basically, on our phones. Although I don't think I'm downloading an NGA app anytime soon myself to download that. Tony made an interesting point earlier, just before the call, that with all of this, so much data, trying to wrestle with it and analyze it effectively. Yet the world is still undermapped. And I'm wondering if you agree with that assessment. And we do have a question from our audience. One of them is, what percentage of the Earth's surface is covered weekly? And I would just, I don't know if you have that data point, to top of mind, but I'm just kind of curious. Would you agree with that assessment that the world is undermapped? So we're going to have ever more data coming at us shortly?
Sure. I'll start with the second point. And unfortunately, I don't have that data at my fingertips. But I'm stunned at how much is imaged every single week. And again, imaged, there are multiple capabilities. The US government, of course, the commercial market is just absolutely exploding with just a number of capabilities there via a number of phenomenologies as well. So it's not just what's referred to as electro-optical or kind of pictures, but radar. We mentioned, some of the infrared. Tony mentioned that earlier as well. But to your question about, is the world unmapped? The answer is yes, it is absolutely unmapped. And part of it is because the world is always changing. We know that terrain features are changing. We know that the broader construction on the Earth. And so, yeah, a good portion of the world is unmapped. And we do think that there is a lot more to come. And Tony also alluded to this as well. We've been seeing the world through 2D, and I think the future is clearly going to be 3D. And when we think about how do you map the world from a 3D standpoint, that does introduce a whole nother dynamic to the discussion. So we do think that there is a lot more to be done in that area.
Great. And thank you for that. And I know that there are a lot of ways you can, obviously, we're talking about doing this in an open source way, but there's a lot of public-private partnerships happening as well. I know the NGA is running an accelerator program to help commercial activity develop here as well. Would love to get your views on that, on public-private partnerships and how those might help with these efforts as well.
Absolutely. And again, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but we genuinely do believe that the future of this agency and the future of our success is going to be tied to our partnerships. And the public-private partnership is a key aspect of it. As I mentioned earlier, again, we have a number of relationships with academic institutions, with think tanks, and then with commercial partners. And, the value of our commercial partners is their ability to innovate so rapidly and their ability to introduce new technology. And so you mentioned our accelerator program. And to me, or to us, that is really one of the things that we think we hope is going to really accelerate a lot of the work that we're doing. And that will be a partnership with several companies that have been recently chosen to work on a number of next generation GeoInt technologies that we think that will have tremendous payoff as we look at the core things that we have to be able to do, which is ensure that we've got our position, navigation, and timing efforts and our geomatic sciences very, very tight. We got to make sure that we can accelerate our collection orchestration. We've got to make sure that we've got, we refer to as the ability to get data out to the right place at the right time in a very secure way. And then the final place is really further introducing computers and machine learning into our analytic workflow and how our teammates conduct their job every day by better harnessing computers.
Fantastic. And let's dig into that a little bit, actually, and get back to your newly developed, I guess you have roots in St. Louis. It's not entirely newly developed, but you are building out a new, what you call West Campus in St. Louis. And would love to hear a little bit about that and the academic partnership you forged with Harris Stowe State, a historically Black college in the region. And some of the mapping you're doing, it's not all global. Some of it can be local. And talk a little bit about youth mappers and mapathons to kind of bring up the academic chops of those students. I'd love to hear from you.
Sure. So first off, on our campus in the West, again, we have had a presence in St. Louis for many, many years. And again, it was really some of our predecessor organizations that did a lot of, again, we refer to it as foundation, but a lot of the charting and the mapping and the cartography that the U.S. government was doing. Great facility in downtown St. Louis, but it is getting older. And so we are moving forward with a multi-million-dollar project that we think will come to fruition in 2025. We refer to it as the N2W Campus. It will be in downtown St. Louis. And of course, we believe it'll be state-of-the-art, but one of the things that we're really trying to push is about 40% of that facility we intend to make and design so that it can host unclassified forums, that we can do a lot of classified work. Obviously, as a member of the intelligence community in the Department of Defense, our default is typically with classified information, and that is a huge part of our mission, but we're increasingly convinced that we have to be able to have space and have areas where we can collaborate with industry and we can collaborate with academia to further these efforts. Of course, St. Louis and that broader region is really accelerating their relationship with geospatial sciences, and they're really becoming a hub for our nation. And so you mentioned the partnership with Harris Stowe. We've got some other partnerships out there. There's a huge technology push to have more technology in the geospatial sciences based in St. Louis. And so we're really just thrilled to be a part of it. And we hope that in many ways, this new campus is going to serve as just another accelerator for that part of the country. To your point about really working with youth, we genuinely believe that we are in absolute competition for the talent of our country. We are absolutely and always looking for great young talent, STEM talent in particular, and we think that we have a role and a responsibility to help cultivate quite a bit of that as well. When we look at our recruiting efforts and we look at bringing talent in, one of our most successful efforts is we have an internship program here at NGA. And I know in my days of being an intern, many years ago, I was taking out the trash and, dusting desks and everything else like that. And we bring in college students to really do substantive, thoughtful, important work for us. And at the end of their time here, in fact, this program literally just started this week for us. And so it's kind of fun to see, younger college age students now bouncing around our campus here as well. But that has really just been an incredibly fruitful way for us to bring talent in. And once they graduate, bring them further into the agency. And so any efforts that we can take to help cultivate our youth, because again, we absolutely believe we're in a competition. And one of the ways we're doing it is through these partnerships with these academic institutions and the ability to bring interns in to really help our agency, not in the short term, but also in the long term.
That's outstanding, General Cleveland. And it's great I think you'll have resumes flying at you after this discussion from college students who are on the line. We have a very large student readership and international relations focused student readership at FP. And also it's great to hear how the impacts of what NGA is doing is at the local level as well as the global level, as we say at FP. Think globally, drink locally. So good for you on that front. I want to thank you, General Cleveland, for participating. A really interesting discussion. Thanks for spending some time with us today.
Thanks again for the opportunity, Andrew, and wish you the best and look forward to following up at the next event.
Absolutely. Thank you, General Cleveland. That was Major General Charles Cleveland, Associate Director at the National Geospatial Intel Agency, or NGA. Now let's proceed with our next conversation. I am delighted now to be joined by two esteemed panelists who are experts and practitioners working on the forefront of space affairs and the use of geospatial intelligence for humanitarian applications. Carrie Stokes is the Chief Geographer and Director of the Geo Center at USAID. And we will be joined, I think, ultimately by Simonetta De Pippo. She's the Director of the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. We have been informed that Simonetta is slightly delayed. I don't think there's some extraterrestrial issue with the super blood moon lunar eclipse or anything along those lines, but she will be a little delayed in signing on with us. But in the meantime, I really am very happy to welcome Carrie. She is the first geographer of USAID, headquartered in Washington, D.C. 10 years ago, she established and now directs the USAID Geo Center, which applies geographic analysis to development programming. Welcome, Carrie.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Happy to be here.
Thank you so much. And as I mentioned, we'll be joined by Simonetta shortly. We're told by her people that she'll be online in no time. And I want to actually refresh our audience. Please do ask questions of Carrie, and ultimately Simonetta, when she's on the line, will be able to field those as we go. So Carrie, again, I think a lot of folks are familiar with USAID and the work that they do. If you could just tell us for a moment about the Geo Center. What is the Geo Center? What is its mission within USAID?
Sure. So the Geo Center is a team of geographers and data analysts, and we are embedded inside of USAID. We work with our colleagues both in Washington, D.C., where the headquarters of USAID is based, and we work with our field offices known as missions all around the world. We've got about 100 countries in the world where USAID has a presence, and we work in many regions: Africa, Asia, Latin America, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe, as well as in many sectors, as we call it. So everything from democracy and governance, economic growth, environment issues, conflict and stabilization, global health issues, and the like. So as geographers, we get to tap those different sectors and data sets from them, and then the regions where USAID works and the countries where USAID works, to get a better picture of what's happening on the ground with the data.
Excellent. And can you give us some examples of that in practice? Maybe you could share a little. I know you have something that we were talking about earlier about how you measure. It's not always about a crisis in terms of a disaster or some humanitarian crisis, or climate or otherwise. Sometimes it's just measuring progress and the efficacy of the work that you do. Is that right?
Yes, it is. So as you can imagine, with as a development agency working all over the world in all those sectors that I mentioned and beyond, one of our greatest challenges is just understanding where we're working. Where are our projects on the ground, specifically at subnational levels? So one of the main things that we do is help our colleagues understand where we're working. but not only where we are working, we also really like to use our data analytics skills to better understand where we should be working. Where is the need the greatest? And comparing those two. In many cases, they line up, but in some cases they don't. And those reasons could be very good reasons. So the kinds of things that we do range from helping our colleagues address the challenges related to climate change, the challenges related to bringing rural electrification to countries in Africa, helping to prevent malaria. Malaria is one of the biggest killers of children under 5 in sub-Saharan Africa. And also, of course, responding to COVID-19. So it may not be obvious how satellites are related to these things, but I'm happy to give you some examples of how we do this. What you're seeing at the moment is one of the products that we produced, and it was an effort to understand whether or not access to electricity had increased in the African countries where we have been working to improve access to electric power. So as you see with this animation, you can begin to see in the 3 countries here that we're looking at that yes, indeed, over time, and if you really focus in on the year 2015, you'll begin to see a jump. These are night lights from space using satellite data that NOAA publishes. And we were able to provide this animation to get a better sense of, yes, indeed, we are seeing increased access to electricity on the ground.
That's fantastic. I think there's a lot, I mean, that again is just an easy way to look at the progress that is being made and a great way to measure some of the programs that you've been undertaking and whether they've been effective. There was another example that you had mentioned about work that USAID does in NagornoKarabakh as well, in landmines. I was wondering if you might expand on that for a moment. That would be really interesting and insightful to share.
Sure. So this particular region of the world is between the countries of Armenia and Azerbaijan, and has had some historical unrest. So one of the ways that we're using satellite technology to save lives is through our partners who work on the ground to disarm legacy landmines in that region. The satellite imagery is instrumental in helping us understand where we may have already worked, where we may see changes in land patterns on the ground, and then creating maps from the imagery to better plan the response of targeting particular areas that we think may be susceptible to further landmines. So keeping track of that work, it's very tedious work, takes incredible expertise, it's dangerous work. So we're pleased to be able to help our partners on the ground who do this work with access to high resolution imagery, which, by the way, I may add, was through our partnership and the generosity of NGA to share access to high resolution imagery, which comes from Maxar.
That's outstanding. Thank you for noting that partnership works. And speaking of partnerships, I know that there's a long-standing partnership that you run at USAID with NASA on climate. Would love to hear a little bit about that as well, and how that partnership figures in your work.
Yeah, so we do have a long-standing relationship with NASA. It's about 16 years now running. The program is called Servir, which is a Spanish word that means to serve. The program initially started in a Spanish-speaking region in Central America, and it's now expanded to regions all over the world and more than 40 countries that were active. But with specific regard to using satellite data, one of the main purposes of this program is to build the capacity of our developing country partners to get access to satellite predictive models and imagery and data if they don't have their own space agencies like the US does. So one application in particular that's been very effective in saving lives is in the country of Bangladesh, which experiences seasonal flooding, but the country does not necessarily have access to stream gauge data from other countries that border the nation. And if you are familiar with a bit of your geography, Bangladesh is below, has part of the Himalayan, Hindu Kush Himalayan mountain chain, but also water runs downhill. And so if you are wanting to get an advanced warning about particular areas that may be subject to flood, now we're using a stream flow prediction tool that was developed through Frazier in our partnership with NASA and with our regional partner that's based in the country of Nepal. So this tool provides advanced early warning. Previous to having the tool, people may have gotten 3 to 5 days advance notice, but now with this, we can better model and predict what the stream levels may be and provide people with 5 to 8 days warning. And that's enough time, or it's more time, to not only just seek higher ground if necessary, but safe places, but to also perhaps adjust management decisions in your fields with your livestock if you need to move them out of harm's way.
That's excellent. Thank you for sharing that. And that sounds like a brilliant way to activate that understanding. I think Simonetta has joined us now. So if we could for a minute bring Simonetta into the discussion. I believe we had her here a second ago in any event. Did she go away?
Here I am.
Oh,
Can
here
you hear
she
me?
is. Hello.
Yeah, hello. Sorry, but there was a bit of overlap. Okay, I'm sorry. Here I am.
We're happy to have you here, Simonetta. So real quick introduction. Thank you for joining us, and we'll dive right into it. You're the director of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, very important agency in Vienna, I believe. Is that correct? And,
correct.
Okay, great. And I know that your office is focused on the peaceful development of space. You promote the use of space tech and science for economic and social development. But to dive right into it, you also have a very interesting platform to help with disaster response called SPIDER, which stands for Space-Based Information for Disaster Management and Emergency Response. Can you tell us a little bit about the SPIDER program, how it works, and its mission in disaster reduction and mitigation?
Yeah, for sure. No, thank you very much. And also thank you for being so kind to wait for me. In reality, the office as a whole is a sort of a capacity builder. Is really what we do is really to support emerging and developing countries to get knowledge, to really be able to grasp the benefits of space. But it's quite broad as a mandate, and it will take quite a lot to go in deep details. But if we focus on the SPIDER program, well, the SPIDER program is a program assigned to the Office for Outer Space Affairs, but is let's say, has the privilege of having a dedicated General Assembly resolution approved in 2006, and indeed is dealing with disaster risk reduction and emergency response. And the main mandate that the office has through this SPIDER program is to provide to all member states of the United Nations, so the 193 member states, with space-based data and services to allow them to better tackle the entire disaster management cycle, and in particular, as is still in the title, the emergency response phase. Now, what we do is really to work across the board with institutions in several countries. The point is that one institutional mission or one training session or one capacity building activity is not enough. So what we do with the countries, we are working more in detail, because clearly we have to go, in steps. We cannot work with all the countries at the same time. But with each country, we really do a certain number of activities, step by step, one after the other, to allow the country to really use space-based data to tackle their disasters. And this brings very often to them to be able to become, to be able to activate even the Charter on Space and Natural Disasters, which is an organization supporting the countries which have problems with natural disaster, not only natural, to get space images, to get information, because this is extremely important then in the phase of managing the disaster itself. Clearly, as you can understand, the more you're quick, the better it is, because in case of a disaster, you need to intervene, the sooner the better. And so we have a range of agreements with public and private players who really provide us with what they can In particular, we range from, let's say, medium resolution images to high resolution images, sometimes also radar images, and with that we either help them, help the countries in need, providing already images, with all the features needed extracted, or sometimes we provide the raw data when the country has been already trained to be able to grasp the key information, the key products from the images. Then this is just one of the programs we have. We have plenty of initiatives, and in reality, we started to work also with the private sector a bit ago, becoming a sort of a champion in the UN Secretariat on how to deal with the private sector. Clearly, space is innovation by definition. So what we try to do is also to innovate, to have an office, the Office for Outer Space Affairs, which is more fit for purpose in the 21st century. So we do capacity building, but we try to do capacity building in a new way, maintaining the same approach, but also changing a little bit mind in an innovative and creative manner.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing. And a couple of really interesting questions coming in. I don't know if you mind fielding one. This is from Ben Silverstein at the Carnegie Endowment's Space Project in Washington. And Ben writes that last year, Norway announced it was working with partners to process and distribute current and historical Earth observation data as a global public good, somewhat in contrast to the US practice of distributing space-derived data in the aftermath of a crisis or a disaster event. Can you share your thoughts on the nature of satellite imagery and data products as a global public good or a utility?
Well, this is clearly, I cannot enter into, the commercial side of it. We have the feeling, let's put it like that, we are fully convinced that the inclusiveness, openness, and also for example, in Copernicus, for the European Earth observation system, Copernicus is the data are free and open. For example, we are an authorized user for Copernicus, and that's also one of the sources for us for data. But we also have agreements with space agencies, governments, and private sector. And I have to say that they provide us free of charge high resolution images when we are in need. So I have to say that there are also nuances. It's not necessarily black or white. Right. Clearly, it's important to have also repository of all data and images collected in the past years, because this is very helpful also for disaster, but not only for disasters. And so we are really planning to do something of this kind, trying to collect all the information, all the data already purchased by the UN. It's a long process because there are some legal constraints, but we are working on that also with other UN entities to really try to create something that is public. By the way, the knowledge portal of the SPIDER program is free of charge. You can consult it. There are a lot of information every time there is a disaster. We even created a dedicated page during the COVID-19 pandemic, collecting space-based solutions for combating COVID-19. We are also looking at the post-COVID-19 phase, so then let's say to the recovery phase, how to use space, and all this data are public and are on our website.
And our thank you very much, Simonetta, for that. And our participants can access that on the unusa.org site, UNOO.
Yeah, and then you have a link to the knowledge portal, or you can go straight to the knowledge portal of the UN SPIDER program.
Many people are writing in asking for this access, so that's wonderful that you can provide that. That intelligence. We talked about now not democratizing space, but making it accessible. This has become a big competition between large nations and as well as large corporate interests in the space realm. Wanted to ask your assessments. This is from actually a question from Hernan Villagran in Chile. In your assessment, do you believe the current pro-free market and power competition rationales behind this new space economy is the right path to foster for more comprehensive space governance that will include developing countries to be part of the very necessary and needed Earth observation emphasis for both security as well as climate and humanitarian needs are developing nations being left behind?
Well, I am really a full believer in international cooperation. And international cooperation is based on knowledge, because you cannot have cooperation between partners which are, I don't want to say at the same level, but at least if you are, let's say, if you want to become a spacefaring country, you want to work in whatever field, Earth observation, GNSS or global navigation satellite system, if you want to work in SATCOMs, if you want to explore Moon, Mars and beyond, well, you need to develop certain technologies, or you need to have your academic environment, your research environment, your private sector environment. And also from an institutional perspective, you need to have the registry of the objects launched into outer space to be in line with the registration convention of the UN. You need to follow the guidelines, the space debris mitigation guidelines, the long-term sustainability guidelines. So, and that's the reason why the convening power of the UN is so important, because we have the Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, currently 95 members. And I hope that we can grow in membership, because it's extremely important as a platform for international cooperation. At the same time, you have the possibility to work with the Office for Outer Space Affairs. So we serve member states both, let's say, serving the committee, so serving the multilateral discussions, but also providing capacity building training, in particular also with new players, because new players need to start their activities with a responsible behavior. What I can tell you is that we are working more and more with the private sector, and the private sector is one of the main, let's say, supporter of the fact that we do need regulation, that we do need a global governance framework. And I'm really currently pushing a lot with the idea that space is really at the center of any decision and policy making processes, and therefore it's absolutely needed to have what we call space traffic management regime, global space governance regime. You can call it as you like, but this really need of a quick understanding of the situation and of an entity which is able to really provide information real time to all the players in the world, in particular the ones who need to understand more how to work in the field, which means emerging and developing nations.
That's a really interesting point. And I'd love to bring Carrie back into the discussion on this point, because there's a really interesting initiative underway that's not based from a national or state level or corporate level. It's really from an academic perspective. And that's the Youth Mapper program that she's helped to develop globally, which keys on OpenStreetMapping data to really utilize students around the world to map and understand in all sorts of countries around the world. Maybe, Carrie, you could tell us in the few minutes that we have left a little bit about that effort.
Sure, thanks, Andrew. This gets back to the comment that General Cleveland was making in your conversation with him about these unmapped or undermapped parts of the world. It's easy to forget for those of us who live in either the United States or Europe that there are places in our countries that haven't been mapped, because we have access to so much immediate mapping information, even on our cell phones these days. But where USAID works in most places in the world, those do not have the basic foundational mapping data. And so to ensure that we could get granular level, community level foundation mapping data, roads, buildings, schools, houses, and the like, we started a program in partnership with the academic community. And the idea behind it was to create new geospatial data where it had not existed before that could be used for international development and humanitarian projects. The other objective of this program was to empower the youth in the universities in the world to use new digital mapping capabilities that exist in today's digital era. The OpenStreetMap platform is open and available to anyone who has access to the internet. And we are leveraging that platform, providing these basic mapping skills. We have more than 5,000 students, more than 250 universities around the world. Almost 60 countries are represented by these mapping clubs. And the students map features on the ground that we are highlighting our priorities for us. We use that data So for example, and we've used it for disaster response, we've used it for international development planning, but to make it relevant to today's situation with the pandemic that we're still all working around and addressing, one of the first things that these students, we were able to activate the network soon after the pandemic came to light for the world, to use their mapping skills, which they can do from home. They can do it remotely. And they began to map all of the health facilities around the world. So this is a combination of volunteers who already know how to work in the OpenStreetMap environment, but it became very clear for the response to COVID globally that we did not know as a community, where were the hospitals, where were the doctor's offices, where were the health clinics, where were the pharmacies. So one way to get data quickly is to employ the amazing skills of our young people. And so the Youth Mappers program was able to contribute more than 25% of the new mapping facilities that we create that were added to the OSM, and now there are more than 900,000 facilities globally accessible to anybody who has access to the healthsites.io website, which is part of OSM.
That's fantastic. And I know that's that same Mapathon logic that the NGA and Maxar are using at their campus, at NGA's campus in St. Louis. Simonetta, I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts on activating the world's youth to access this data. Before you joined, we talked a lot about how while the world is undermapped, there's just much too much data out there for any one entity to be able to analyze effectively. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting because we have a program called Space for Youth, and we did a competition this year asking to all the youth in the world to propose some new ideas. Also, since this year is COP26, and there is the first summit, youth summit under the umbrella of COP26, we will bring, we wanted to bring the let's say the winners, or at least the winners' ideas at COP. And it was interesting because even if I cannot disclose anything, there were proposals really dealing with social media and trying to use the youth approach to really help the process. Well, this is extremely interesting. And we are working on what we call the Space for Climate Action, which will be announced, this new initiative, at the end of the year. And I really want to combine all the elements. I want to combine the Space for Youth. I want to combine the Space for Climate Action, SPIDER, so disaster management. The fact that we really consider space also as a tool for advancing the concept of gender equality and bringing more young women and girls to the table and things like that. So trying really to look at the situation from different perspectives. And I believe that the youth component and the approach of the youth, I mean the next generation, the generations let's say younger than us, or at least than me, can really have a different angle, and so we can put together some creative ideas for bringing to the table the new tools in line with the 21st century. So I'm really, really excited to bring in also this component.
That is very heartening to hear. And thank you, Simonetta, for sharing that. And Carrie, that is wonderful that you're both so passionate about mechanizing and operationalizing the youth movement. And we heard that from our earlier speakers as well, a really big focus on that, which is a really positive development and a great way to conclude our conversation. We're a few minutes over time, so I do thank you for joining us and spending time with us today. Really, really interesting discussion. Thank you very much, Simonetta and Carrie.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you.
So unfortunately, we have to end it here. It has been a very fascinating conversation. I learned a lot. I hope you did too. To our presenters, it's been my pleasure to speak with you all. Thank you very much for joining us and sharing your perspectives. And thank you for all the cool work you're doing. Also, a very big thanks to Maxar for partnering with us on this convening and very important dialogue. And this is actually the second installment in a series of conversations about space-based tech, and Earth Intel we've convened together with Maxar. Visit the event website, the FP event website, to check out the past event, which was last fall. A full recording is available in our archives at foreignpolicy.com/events. If you haven't already and are interested in a deeper dive on this issue I mentioned earlier, please check out the latest issue brief just released by FP Analytics, our in-house research and advisory division. It's called The Eyes Above: The Implications of Geospatial Data for Responding to Crises. It's available on our website and on FP Analytics .foreignpolicy.com. And please stay tuned for much more to come from FP after the Memorial Day weekend break. We're planning lots more events on diverse and equally fascinating topics, and you can stay tuned to updates on those and sign up at foreignpolicy.com/events. Take care. Thanks again, and see you soon.